aftermath of neo-Nazis marching in the streets of Charlottesville, I joined with Jewish and Democratic leaders from around the country to form JDCA. We came together as a group of deeply concerned and committed Jewish Americans to bring about political change consistent with our values. In the 3 years since JDCA has been around, in partnership with all of you and Speaker Pelosi, who attended our launch in 2017, we have done just that. And I'm very proud of the movement that we've built. In recent weeks, we brought together members of Congress, experts, and thousands of you for conversations entitled Leading in Crisis. At the time we started this call series, there was a crisis, coronavirus, which was very large and threatening the well-being of Americans. Today, it's clear that we face not one crisis, but two. During the last 3 months, Speaker Pelosi has listened to the people of our country and responded with compassion and structure as to the public health crisis and loss of an unprecedented 43 million American jobs. She has continued to bring people, government leaders, and business leaders together to find ways to stabilize our country and businesses and people and get the people back to work. We're going to hear more from her today about the House-passed HEROES Act, which she led. Like so many of you, we are shaken by the events last week in Minneapolis. Our Jewish values call on us to support equality, righteousness, and justice. We believe that an injustice to any community is an injustice to us all. The murder of George Floyd was unconscionable, heartbreaking, and indicative of the continuous and ongoing rise of racism and hatred in America. And President Trump's approach and response has been a betrayal to our Jewish and American values. JDCA stands with the Black community and with those peaceably protesting systemic racism, and we're committed to combating hatred in all forms. Today's speaker, the Speaker, embodies the compassion, unity, strength, and leadership that Americans are looking for in these trying moments. As a former member of Congress myself, who served under her leadership, I consider it an honor to call her a personal friend. But most importantly, as an American, I look to Speaker Pelosi as a source of strength, inspiration, and action. She is a leader who not only shares our values, but acts on those values, and for that we are grateful. Now I'm going to turn it over to JDC board member Ada Horwich, who will formally introduce Speaker Pelosi. Ada?
Thank you, Ron. As one of the founding members of JDCA, I am proud to introduce my friend and my fellow Californian, Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi made history in 2007 when she became the first woman to serve as Speaker of the House. And she did it again in 2019. She reclaimed the gavel for the second time. In her 31 years in Congress, Speaker Pelosi has been at the forefront of so many issues of importance to Jewish Democrats. She is a staunch ally in the fight against anti-Semitism, and she's in support of a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. For those, we are very, very grateful. Last year, JDCA was thrilled to endorse Speaker Pelosi's For the People agenda, which includes expanding voting rights and strengthening our democracy, increasing access to affordable health care, addressing the climate crisis, expanding background checks to end the epidemic of gun violence, and protecting the rights and freedoms of all Americans. This is Speaker Pelosi's agenda, and it is an agenda that Jewish Democrats share with her. Speaker Pelosi is not afraid to literally and figuratively stand up to President Trump as he fans the flames of hatred and divisions in America. In moments of despair, we are uplifted by thoughts of Nancy Pelosi walking out of the White House with her sunglasses and red coat, exuding moral leadership and values. And I just want you to see, I'm wearing the pin. I don't know if everybody can see it. That's Nancy, red coat and sunglasses. I'm so proud to wear it. And we have been very touched by events like Nancy going to Auschwitz for March of the Living. She took a trip there earlier this year and then on to Israel. At the time, she reminded Americans that we must ensure the promise of never again and remain vigilant against hatred and persecution in all of its forms. Speaker Pelosi has been an unwavering champion of our Jewish and democratic values during the ongoing pandemic, legislating to secure health and economic well-being of all Americans. And we are incredibly grateful that she is with us today, not just to speak about Democrats leading in crisis, but to show us what it really means. Thank you for being with us, Madam Speaker, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Ada, for your kind words, which I will accept on behalf of the House Democrats who made so much of what you discussed possible for our country. They are the ones of courage, because many of them come from districts where it's not as easy. It might be for somebody like me coming from California to take these positions. So I thank you for your recognition of their courage and our successes. And I thank you for your leadership in so many of the areas that we discuss, and that's why you recognize some of our successes so well. I thank the Jewish Democratic Council of America for this series, Democrats Leading in Crisis. Ron Klein is a highly respected former member of Congress, but you never know former because his name is magical here. We're so proud of the work that he continues to do, and just the entrepreneurship of starting a new organization and having it be such a wonderful success from the start. I'm sad about losing his beloved father, Marvin, whom I have met, and I can say with some authority, he was very, very proud of Ron Klein. Very, very proud. He was so proud you were in Congress too. So in addition to being a very fine person. So on behalf of the House Democrats, I thank you all, the JDCA, for using your voice to condemn the president's divisive and dangerous behavior that Ron referenced. Thank you for making a consistent drumbeat of awareness and action around bigotry and white nationalism, which seems to have found a comfort level in our country. And it threatens communities of color, the Jewish community, indeed, and the entire community. Every time I have a call, it's whether it's the Asian American community, there's this, everybody, so many people feel very threatened about what is going on. And as you know, this is a really sad time in our country. With the death, the murder that we saw on TV of George Floyd, we not only saw the loss of one life, that would be reason enough, but we saw it as part of a pattern of police brutality in our society, A, and B, just another an array of injustices, whether it's injustice in terms of healthcare and access to education and opportunity, environmental injustice, you name it, so many, obviously in our judicial system as well. So it was explosive, an inflection point. One person all over the world, people are turning out, and many of these crowds, very, very mixed. So with the Congressional Black Caucus, this coming week on Monday, we will be putting forth legislation under leadership of Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, working House and Senate Democrats, for a proposal which we hope the Republicans will endorse. And it is a series of issues of provisions, whether it's racial profiling, stopping the excessive use of force, the qualified immunity doctrine that has police officers immune from any prosecution for what they have done. The list goes on. Unless you ask, I'll just say that's a sampling of some of the things that will be in there. Commission on the social status of Black men and boys, Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, an array of concerns. Now, they all may not be part of one bill. It may be some pillars, but that will be introduced on Monday. So you know that there'll be issues that we were familiar to you because you all have been working on those issues in our country for a long time and been an intellectual resource. Ron mentioned the HEROES Act. And let me just say, when we talk about what's happening now, this injustice. And we're talking about, it points out the injustice of the whole coronavirus, how it has a disparity of impact on communities of color. And you see the uncertainty in terms of people's livelihoods. And you see the assault on absentee voting and things like that. But the HEROES Act is an answer to many of those challenges. It's a lot of money, more than we've ever spent, domestically, that is, over $3 trillion in this one bill over and above what we've spent before. But think of it this way, $3 trillion, less than 1 trillion of it is for honoring our heroes, state and local government, healthcare workers, first responders, police, fire, emergency services, teachers, sanitation, water, you name it, food suppliers, and the rest, the people who make the system work, many of them on the state and local payroll. The money that we're putting in there, go to speaker.gov/Heroes Act, and you'll see how much money goes into your community from that legislation, just that one pillar of the bill. It's less than half. Well, let's say it's about half of what they spent on their tax cut for the wealthy, 83% going to the top 1%. Less than half of that is what we give to keep government open at the state and local level. The next is, let's open our economy, testing, tracing, treatment, distancing. We know that that works. We don't have a vaccine yet, and we don't have a cure yet. God willing, it will be soon, but we do know that this works, and that takes money, and especially to do it in communities of color who have that disparity, more people dying proportionally, in a disproportionate way to the communities. We have to test so that we know that we can trace and treat and save lives. And then the third piece is, so honor our heroes, state and local, open our economy, testing, tracing, treating, and then the third, putting money in the pockets of the American people. But you know so much about all of that because of your other friends in the Congress who've been before you. Just wanted you to know. I call it the 7 hills of Rome. The 3 pillars, and then in addition to that, we have 4 things. One is safety in the workplace. They've all supported these first 3 pillars to a lesser extent, but nonetheless in the past. They have resisted doing OSHA, safety in the workplace. They are resistant, although they've done it before, to help us with food. Imagine, SNAP, emergency food services, they're reluctant to do that. That's another fight. That's another foothill of Rome. These are the hills of Rome. These are foothills. The third is the Postal Service. Over 1 billion packages were delivered to people last year, most of it medicine. 90% of the medicine our veterans get come through the mail, the Postal Service. And then fourth, in no particular order, the issue of vote by mail, and we need the money for that. So those 4 plus those 3, that's the fight we're in. We have bipartisan support around the country. Richard Trumka said to me a couple nights ago, he said, all the things that are happening right now, the injustice of it all on the streets, the health issue and the disparity of coronavirus, and the need to keep government functioning, are all served by the HEROES Act. So those are just some of the things that we're up to. McConnell said we need a pause. We're saying that, hey, the virus isn't taking a pause, hunger isn't taking a pause, joblessness is not taking a pause, rent is not taking a pause. We need this money to, again, honor our heroes, open our economy, and put money in the pockets of the American people in a very fair way. And again, they talk about the money when they spend twice as much as what we are doing in the honor our heroes part of this bill to give tax cuts to the high end. Speaker.gov/Heroes Act. You will be very surprised to see how much it means to your communities, and you'll understand why we have broad bipartisan support in the country to get it done. I would rather then go on to hear some of your questions because there's so much to talk about here, but why don't we prioritize it by hearing what you all have to say? And again, thank you all. So proud of what you're doing, and this initiative is one that is very positive and constructive for our country, and a way to channel so much of that beautiful energy, intellect, and idealism that you all have under the leadership of Ron Klein. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. We are deeply appreciative for your leadership and for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you for your leadership as Executive Director.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Susie Stern in New York for the first question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you noted and spoke about, our country is facing a twofold crisis right now. Not only are we seeing Americans impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, but millions of people are rightfully outraged about the murder of George Floyd, and with an ongoing protests in every city across this country. This is clearly a pivotal moment in the fight for racial justice, and JDC stands in solidarity with the Black community in combating bigotry. I would like you to speak a little bit more about how the Democratic leadership is thinking about systemic racism.
I thank you for that, Susie. Let me just, you mentioned earlier my visit to Auschwitz and the 70th anniversary anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and then on to Israel to have that observance there. Another trip that I had last year, which was, it's a funny thing how they had such a similarity. I went to Ghana. I took the Black Caucus members to Ghana for the 400th anniversary of the first slaves being sent to the United States. I mean, well, we didn't exist, across the ocean. And they were kidnapped, or they were bought, they were put in dungeons of inhumane, horrible treatment that were deadly in many cases. But if you survived that, you got to go on a death ship to go across the ocean. And if you survived that, you were sold into slavery. And if you survived that, your family survived that for a couple hundred years, Jim Crow, all the rest of that. So there's a, but what the both had in common, and I never let you ever put anything in the category of the Holocaust, but what they both had in common was people dehumanizing other people. People dehumanizing other people. When we were in Ghana in the dungeons, what was happening 400 years ago, people in the dungeons, but overhead, they were attending church service, the hypocrisy of it all, but as if these people were not worthy of being God's children and the rest. So in terms of this issue, our members, and you don't have to, it isn't just the Black Caucus, but the Black Caucus has so much experience in terms of family, in terms of just even future. Their sons, telling their sons to be careful when they go out, even to this day. So they have been really a tremendous, again, I use the term intellectual resource to us. They have years of experience, some of them, and some of them are fresh into the Congress, young and with their ideas. And so, again, it's about the whole system of the injustice of it all. As I mentioned, whether it's health insecurity, I know Michael and Susie are very interested in that, about health issues, whether it's about environmental injustice. When we do the infrastructure climate issues, it's about environmental injustice. Why are they predisposed to this virus? Because their respiratory systems have been assaulted by pollution in their communities. It's almost in every aspect of what we do. And the hopeful part of it is people are turning out in a very, by and large, peaceful way to say, we're crossing a threshold here. We've been down this path before. We've cried, we've prayed, but this is somehow or other. Maybe the coronavirus was the setup, and the injustice of that and people staying in made it explosive. But we have real opportunity now to do that, but it'll be based on the experience, the knowledge, the values, the respect that we all have for the Congressional Black Caucus. And by the way, everything I talk about addresses communities of color beyond the Black community. So our tricolor, I call it the three caucuses of Black, Hispanic, and Asian Pacific, and now Native Americans joining in to address those injustices. But we know, I mean, we have a value, we have a vision of what we want to do. We have a plan on how to get it done. We have a timetable, we have milestones, we have benchmarks, and we have, again, the members, leaders in the Congress who, in the caucus who command great respect. So we're on our way, and Monday will unfold part of that. That will be the police brutality, et cetera, racial injustice part there. And then we'll unfold our health initiative, our infrastructure, climate, environmental justice pieces of it, much of it before the 4th of July.
Thank you. Be strong.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Marcia Rickless in New York.
Hi, Marcia. How are you, dear?
Hi, Madam Speaker. Thank you again for your incredible, courageous leadership from all of us. My question is about the choice that Americans are being forced to make sometimes between their health and the right to vote. JDCA is deeply concerned about the Republican-led attempts, as we saw in Wisconsin, to force Americans to choose between their health and their right to vote in this election. We have mobilized thousands of Jewish Democrats to write to their members of Congress, encouraging full funding for vote by mail and for the US Postal Service, as you spoke about earlier, because without mail, we cannot vote by mail in this election. What steps are Democrats taking to ensure every eligible American can vote safely in this election?
Marcia, with your permission, I'm going to sign this letter that is just put in front of me. It's a letter that I'm sending to the president right now, asking for, expressing concern with the increased militarization and lack of clarity that may increase chaos. I'm writing to request a full list of the agencies involved in clarifications of the rules and responsibilities of the troops and the federal law enforcement resources operating in the city. Congress and the American people need to know who is in charge, what is the chain of command, what is the mission, and by what authority is the National Guard from other states operating in the Capitol. We also address the issue that to make matters worse, officers have refused to provide identification and have been deployed without identifying insignia. This is a very bad thing in the democracy, and the letter goes on. So with your permission, I will sign that and answer your question.
Excellent. We want you to sign that. Thank you.
I want them to get it right away for the, thank you. So here's the thing. In our bill, what we would like to have is $4 billion in order to do everything that we need to do in the best possible way to facilitate the vote by mail. Long before the coronavirus, this was our initiative. But when we had the first coronavirus bill, we put in $400 million. There's a lot of money, but not enough in the first bill. And we put in things that we wanted, like same-day registration, every registered voter be getting a vote by mail ballot, that there be appropriate venues for people to vote if for one reason or other they want to, and spelling out what that is, and provisions like that. What the Republicans did, well, we had almost $2 trillion in the bill. They took it down to 400, and then they put, well, you have to have matching funds, you have to do this, you have to do that, and you have to do that. Well, nobody agrees with them, including the National Association of State Secretaries of State, bipartisan. The head person is a Republican, writing to say get rid of all of those barriers to participation. So now with this bill, we're putting $3.6 billion in to try to get us up to $4 billion. I'm not sure we need every penny of that, but the more money you have, the more you can do. When I say it, I'm sure if they would cooperate, we wouldn't need that much money. But if they don't cooperate, we do need that much money. And it is now, I mean, this is an initiative we've had. Now it's a matter of health. Before it was a matter of democracy. Now it's a matter of the health of the person as well as the health of the democracy. So we have those same provisions, same day registration, mail the ballot, that. And we hope that the that we can sustain that and get a substantial amendment. This is a big thing for the president. He wants to stop this, but it's a health issue. Wisconsin had its primary. Court said they couldn't do the full vote by mail. Supreme Court acting like party hacks, the Republicans there, sad to say. But nonetheless, people got infected because they were standing in long lines, long time, getting into polling places. This is a health issue now. So our bill, the HEROES Act, is about the lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy. This is a very big deal for us. Be encouraged by this. There's a very strong bipartisan movement in the country for vote by mail. People really want to do that. Older people, I say older people, how dare I say such a, older people really want to vote by mail. We say vote at home, want to vote at home. So we think that they're either going to have to enable this to happen or pay a price for it. And I could say that about a lot of things in the bill. But in this case, in District of Columbia, 2 days ago, people were standing in line for hours. It's ridiculous. And again, Republicans and Democrats across the country, and I thank you all for the Jewish Democratic Council's and enthusiasm for this and your organizing, mobilizing around it. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to combine two questions. So first we'll hear from Michael Rosenzweig, and then we'll hear from Michael Adler.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for joining us and for all the things you're doing for our country. My question is about anti-Semitism, which sadly, unfortunately, is a great and increasing concern to members of the American Jewish community and indeed all Americans. You mentioned your visit to Auschwitz. As you know, last month, the Never Again Holocaust Education Act became law. It's something that's clearly needed in our country. It provides for funding for Holocaust education. It's obviously important, but we all know that it's not enough. JDCA was very proud to support the bill, but we continue to be concerned about what else we can be doing and what else all Americans can be doing. So my question, Madam Speaker, is how can we continue to work together to combat the rise of anti-Semitism and the unprecedented number of anti-Semitic incidents targeting Jews in the last year and in the last couple of years? We're really seeing this in a way that we've not seen it in many, many years.
Thank you, Michael. Fine question. Michael?
Sure.
Has the Adler family say hi for me?
Will do. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks for being on the call today, and it's been a pleasure for all these years to work with your unbelievable leadership. The JDCA strongly supports the U.S.-Israel relationship, including unconditional U.S. military aid to Israel, and opposes President Trump and Republicans' ongoing efforts to politicize Israel and to use it as a wedge issue to divide Democrats and our country. What is your view of President Trump's policies on Israel, including his administration's so-called peace plan, which appears to encourage Israel annexation of parts of the West Bank?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Obviously, the questions are related because the U.S.-Israel relationship is so important to us because of the nature of our two countries and what we have in common and shared values. And the idea that there would still be anti-Semitism in our country is something so shocking, but we should probably never be surprised. When we were at Auschwitz and saw, if you haven't been there, prepare yourself. It is, how can I say, by what right do these people decide that they would be anti-Semitic? But what we're talking about there is, again, ever vigilant and ever raising our standards to a higher level. This isn't what our country is about. For years, Michael, I has, as leader and as speaker and as leader and speaker, when I would appoint members to go to interparliamentary groups, like the NATO Assembly, one thing and another, and they have every different kind of combination you can imagine, I would say to them, make sure you always put on the table first our concern with the rise of anti-Semitism, especially in Europe. Little did I know that a number of years later in the US, matters would get worse with the, shall we say, acquiescence of the President of the United States. Really, I think that he deserves, it's no use finger pointing, but the fact is he has created a climate in which this has become more acceptable. And I don't even go into some of the examples, you know them. But the, what they did, just for example, what they did in Charlottesville, they were coming down the hill with anti-Semitic slogans. And the president said, they're good people on both sides. Really? So again, the challenge is maybe there's more conspicuous, we can root it out better. But the fact is, these people are teaching their children bad things too. And I think that what you all are doing, just taking it to a higher values place, this isn't what America is about. And we have to be an example to the world. But education, 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 and that's what we were talking about in Israel, and that's what we were talking about in Auschwitz, in Poland, was about you have to constantly be vigilant, constantly be educating against it, inoculating against it, countering it, and taking people to a better place. But it's really shocking that it had such fertile territory in our own country when we were thinking we were going to teach the rest of the world that they shouldn't be anti-Semitic. It would be foolish to pretend we didn't see some of it, but not to be, we thought we were better than that. So I thank you for, and aren't you proud of yourselves to have the Jewish Democratic Council formed in time to deal with all of this? I mean, really, Ron, Haley, the rest of you, it's a good thing you're there. If you had not been formed, you'd have to be formed right now to deal with what is there. In terms of Israel, you know, we passed a resolution that the resolution was the United States proposal to achieve a just, stable, and lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, expressly supporting a two-state solution as its objective and discourage steps by either side that would make peaceful unilateral annexation of territory just unacceptable. And so that's part of what the current government in Israel is advocating. We really, our arrows are very clear. Unilateral annexation puts the future at risk and undermines U.S. national security interest, undermines our national security interest and decades of bipartisan policy. We always want it to be bipartisan. As you know, we take great pride in President Obama's Memorandum of Understanding, $3.6 or $7 billion, $36-something billion over 10 years. That's our commitment, and we continue to have that. That was signed in 2016 to help Israel defend itself in a variety of ways, and we stand committed to that. But we're very concerned about what we see happening in terms of annexation. And let me just say, I'm not a big fan of the Palestinian leadership in terms of their, shall we say, capability, whatever it is, to be good negotiating partners. I wish they could be better. But I think that everybody can be doing better in terms of it. I went to Israel about, 2 years ago now, and they told me then that was right at the week of Passover and the rest, so a little earlier, April, May, March, like that, that the peace plan was going to be ready in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it was going to be there. Too bad we were there 2 weeks early, but we were seeing the peace plan in 2 weeks. Then we went like a year and a half later. It's going to be here any minute now. And then eventually it did come. It had nothing in common with the word peace or plan. I mean, it was just so 153 more days, and we may have things can be better, Michael, in that regard. But it is important to it's important to our national security. It's important to us for the respect and love that we have for the state of Israel, for its commitment to democracy, the shared values that we have. And we have to do much better in terms of our own standards in relationship to how we move forward with that. Again, we don't want to see anti-Semitism anywhere in the world, in our country or any place, and we don't want to see it acted upon in the Middle East as well. Thank you. Do we have time for one more or not?
Looks like we do, and we have two more, so we're going to try to combine it. First, Michael Goldman. Michael, if you don't mind making yours into a comment, and then we'll turn to Elaine Hamilton.
Great. Hi, Madam Speaker. Susie and I miss our breakfasts, and we hope to continue those in the near future.
Yeah. I learned so much from you at those breakfasts.
and vice versa. You know, JDCA strongly supports ongoing efforts of Democrats to ensure access to affordable health care for all Americans. And of course, this pandemic has become made even more clear that the health care should be treated as a right and not a privilege. Yet Trump has continued efforts to limit Americans' access to health insurance. So we're wondering what steps Democrats are trying to take to ensure Americans can afford accessible and affordable health care at this critical time.
Thank you. And Elaine, for our last comment question.
So, Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd like to express the love and support that you have from your constituents in Northern California. Earlier this week, the president used tear gas to forcibly clear away protesters so that he could have a photo op in front of a church with a Bible. The president's stunt was a gross abuse of power and a misrepresentation of faith. If the president was such a man of faith, he should have considered speaking to the anguish felt by the Americans during this time of crisis. As a person of faith yourself, what do you say to Americans who were distraught at the president's display? And do you have a message for those on the call whose values and even political views are informed by their faith?
Thank you, Elaine. May I take them in order, because that's quite a broad statement that Elaine has asked. Michael, here's what we're doing. When we ran in 2018, with your help and the help of so many of you, we had a very simple agenda for the people. We were going to lower the cost of healthcare by lowering the cost of prescription drugs and preserving the pre-existing condition. 2, lower healthcare costs, bigger paychecks by building the infrastructure of America in a green way. And 3, cleaner government by reducing the role of dark special interest money in politics, empowering the grassroots, Voting Rights Act, ending the voter suppression, vote by mail, that kind of thing. It gave people hope that if their voice was stronger, then the power of the special interest would be weaker. And that is why that had that totality. So what we're doing before the 4th of July, as I mentioned, is we are going to put forth the ACA Stabilization Act. This is our plan. You know, of course, we didn't know about coronavirus at the time, but all the more reason, as you suggest. The ACA was about increasing the threshold under which you could still get a subsidy, increasing the subsidy, making it more affordable. And I can send you the particulars of the bill, but that will, honoring that first pillar, once again, I mean, we passed the HR 3, which is lower cost of prescription drug. We've done other bills, but this sort of brings it all together, the Affordable Care Act, Stabilization Act. That'll be in another couple of weeks in June. And then the next thing will be the infrastructure, green infrastructure legislation, clean air, clean water, broadband into all home, you know, building the infrastructure in a way that democratizes not only the airways, but cleans up the air that people breathe. And so that's a health issue to us. The clean air, clean water is a health issue to us. But that's what we'll be doing. And then we'll have something on, again, the lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy. Elaine, my daughter, Alexandra, she's a filmmaker, she's a documentary maker and journalist, and she was in the square. She called me in the course of the evening and she said, Mom, you wouldn't believe it. People were here calmly, peacefully demonstrating. And then all of a sudden, these people came in, roughed up people, were hitting them with batons, and and she said, I couldn't call you right away because I had tear gas in my eyes and this or that. It was terrible, and it was unprovoked. And then all of a sudden, the president, well, too, like the banana republic leader he aspires to be. I mean, she didn't say that, that's my word. Goes over with a Bible. Oh my God. It's a wonder it didn't burn his hand. But in any case, they had now said, oh, but the demonstrators threw bricks at the law enforcement. They were, by the way, National Park Service security who were sent in to do the dirty work. Now, the next day, they had the prison guards the next day. I mean, really? So in any case, they were saying, we didn't use tear gas. Well, maybe they didn't use tear gas, but they used pellets that exploded and created something similar to tear gas. So when they said, we didn't use tear gas, no, you used a chemical weapon that is designed to do exactly what tear gas does, if you want to split a hair. And then, so he goes over and does what he does. Now, I think that nothing was more eloquent than the statements made by the religious community. The Episcopal bishop of the region denounced what the president did in front of the St. John's Church, which is a beautiful, St. John's Episcopal Church, a beautiful historic landmark. He didn't even say a prayer. I mean, he just like held the Bible as if, I don't know what. The next day, he made a visit to the shrine of John Paul II, who's been now named a pope, a saint. The next day he did that. And the Catholics, and I'm a devout Catholic, however, we have our disagreement over a woman's right to choose. So anytime I'm speaking at a Catholic institution, they denounce it because, you know, and this is what the Catholics said. Now understand this, they never criticized the president because they want Roe v. Wade overturned and they want no woman's right to choose, and you know they are. This is what the Catholic Archbishop said. I find it baffling and reprehensible that any Catholic facility would allow itself to be so egregiously misused and manipulated in a fashion that violates our religious principles, which call upon us to defend the rights of all people, even those with whom we may disagree. St. John Paul II was an ardent defender of the rights and dignity of human beings. His legacy bears vivid witness to that truth. He certainly would not condone the use of tear gas and other deterrents to silence, scatter, or intimidate them for a photo opportunity in front of a place of worship and peace. He said this while Hujijanger was standing in front of the Pope's shrine. That was the next day in Washington, D.C. And do you know, the White House, you know, they put out a statement saying that, or said, whether it was a statement or a quote, that that his going to St. John's was the equivalent of Winston Churchill walking through London after the bombings, and George W. Bush at 9/11. I mean, the press asked me, because I was they had a big, I don't know what you want to call it, kneel-in or something outside the Capitol yesterday. So when I was over there, CNN asked me, what do you think of what they said, Winston Churchill on this and that? I said, they're hallucinating. They really thought they had, well, they were trying to sell a bill of goods. So what I would say is, we have to treat the word is respect. We have to treat everyone with respect, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. What the Pope, they talk about John Paul, we have our disagreements and the rest, but to desecrate a shrine for his own political gain, I don't care whether people go to church or not, that's their own business. But to all of a sudden, just 2 days in a row, going to 2 shrines or 2 churches is like, what? His discomfort level was so apparent. But I would say to people that we have to take our country back for our values. It has to be a country that respects the dignity and worth of every person and does not undermine the vision of our founders about a country where people have constitutional rights to speak out. That respects the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform who fought so that we could do that. Read the Auschwitz, some of the concentration camps, and the vision of our founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, and the aspirations of our children. I know, because we know each other, we've heard this from each other always, this is the most important election of our time. Marcia, how many times have we said that to each other? There is nothing to come, well, maybe 216. We should have won that one. That would have been the most important election. In the absence of that, everything is at stake. So we just want people to be able to vote. And however they vote, we want to have them to hold elected people accountable. Either you understand why, what my values are and what I think this country should go, or you don't, and I will make my vote accordingly. So what you are doing is so important because Lincoln said public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost everything. Without it, practically nothing. But for public sentiment to prevail, people have to know. They have to know. And what you are doing, spreading the word, the drumbeat, the echo chamber of the urgency of it all, it is so important. So it's going to be, what, it's 153, I think it is, or maybe 152 today. It won't be long, but we hope that we could make change with legislation before then, because we want to save lives, save livelihoods and the rest. And, but depending on how long, it's about time. But when they asked me that question, the press, I read from the book of Ecclesiastes, and it said it's about time, time to reap, a time to sow. Actually, it actually says a time to embrace and a time to not embrace. Imagine that. I didn't ever see that there before, but it did. But it also is a time to heal. And we have to be, what we do, no matter how hard we want to fight, we have to do so in a way that is unifying and not dividing in our country. And I think we have a great opportunity to do so. Are we allowed to say that we're going to win the House in a big way? We have to win the Senate, and that's possible. And of course, we will elect Joe Biden President of the United States. I'm in the Capitol, but I can say like less than a minute of politics in my conversation. So I don't know what you can receive, but that's what I can say. It's about civics more than politics. That's what I think. But thank you individually. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Michael. Michael's sort of ran the show here. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Susie. Did I say? Ada, where'd she go? Thank you, darling. Thank you all very much for what you do. Haley, thanks. And Ron Klein, our hero. What a guy. What an idea. What an idea. And look at how you have implemented it very effectively. Thank God. Thank you for your patriotism, all of you. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. To end the call, I want to turn it to our Vice Chair, another founder of JDCA, Barbara Goldberg Goldman in Maryland. Barbara.
Thank you so much, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you for spending an inordinate amount of time, totally unexpected and quite an honor for JDCA to be hosting you. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being a role model for all women today and for generations to come. And we really do mean that from the very bottom of our hearts. And I want to also thank all of the people who have been joining us for this 13th call in our Democrats Leading in Crisis call series. I do hope everyone will join us next Tuesday at 3 p.m. when we will hear from Jewish women of color about systemic racism in America and its impact on communities of color. Please visit jewishdems.org today. Become a part of our growing movement. We are a movement. And please get involved in joining a state chapter. You can find all of that information on our website. JDCA's...
To join?
Excuse me?
To join?
Yes. We love you. You do not have to be Jewish to join. We are
Jewish grandchildren, does that count?
Yes, 100%. But we are an inclusive group, And you do not have to be Jewish to join our movement. Our movement is for everyone because we are the values of Democrats, and that is what we embrace, and that is what our message is. So we hope everybody will come to jewishdems.org, and please do join us. Our work has never been more important. We're going to be sending people out in the virtual field right now, and perhaps hopefully in the real field once we get further along in the general election. So join us, because we are supporting you, Madam Speaker. We are supporting the Democratic Party. It is who we are and what we do. We're organizing in advance of, you're right, the most important election of our lifetime. And we hope everyone will join us. And we thank you. And again, Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We know how busy you must be. Thank you.
My total pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your patriotism. Onward to victory.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Karen.